All right, we are live.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Atheist Republic Hangout. I am Makisha, and we are today going to be talking about whether or not we believe religion is child abuse. And as always, everybody's opinions are their own. No necessary reflection on Atheist Republic or atheism in general. And of course, whenever we speak on behalf of Atheist Republic, we're speaking on behalf of ourselves, not as edicts of Atheist Republic. Just a little bit of history about this group. We started as a group of people trying to get to know each other a little bit better, and we've kind of expanded, trying to talk about issues of interest to us, and we hope are issues of interest to you. So thanks for joining us here today. If you are watching and you have questions or comments, you can tweet us at the hashtag Atheist Republic. You can also, there's an event on the Facebook group, and you can leave comments and questions there, which I will be reading some and referring to some as we go along. So today with us we have Allie, Armin, Courtney, Erasmo, Lisa, Todd, and myself again, and Makisha. We are from all over the place. I don't know where we've got everybody hailing from today. I should probably pay more attention to that, but Atheist Republic is from everywhere, and we have people as far away as India and as close to home, Atheist Republic based in Canada. So let's get started today with just, again, the question is, and this was just for a little bit of reference, and we'll put links in our YouTube video when this is all over if you want to refer back to them. But this was inspired by an article that was posted in our Atheist Republic team group. And it was, I'm trying to find the, as I'm talking here, I'm trying to find the author. Valerie Tirico, it was from Alternet. And the headline was Children as Property, the Common Root of Religious Child Abuse and the Pro-Life Movement. And the article kind of went on a little, several different directions, but that's where we were, that's where it was inspired. And so then we posed the question to the group, is religion child abuse? Just blanket statement, and then we went, and then from there I think we'll go in lots of different directions, because obviously that's a very broad statement. But let's start out with that question, is religion child abuse? And then we'll see kind of where everybody takes us. Who wants to start off with some thoughts on this? I can actually, you know what I can do that might help us get in a direction. I'm going to read some comments from the event that was posted. We have a couple, most of the people I think who commented just pretty much said yes, or yes because it's human rights abuse. But we did have a couple of views that were a little dissenting on that. One of the comments from Eric is yes, because it's easy for an adult to threaten and scare a child into believing that if they do something wrong they will go to hell. It's far less convincing when you try to tell an adult, but the weak and ignorant will buy into the lie. And interestingly, the feedback is very often directed toward Christianity, I've noticed. And so I'd like to talk about and maybe suss out how that looks when we're talking about religion in general, not just in Christianity. And if what we're actually discussing is certain behaviors that are common in religion, as opposed to religion itself teaching religion itself being an act of child abuse. And then we had somebody else say that it's no more child abuse than telling kids about Santa or the boogeyman. And that was Sean, and he was kind of our most active dissenter in that particular conversation. And he was, I'm sorry, I'm assuming it's a guy. I can't tell by the biopic. I do know that there are quite a few girls named Sean, so I apologize if that's not correct. But he was commenting frequently about, you know, this. A lot of the comments are about Christianity. What about Buddhism? What about other religions that don't have hell in their doctrine? And so that's something else that we can talk about. So what do you guys think? Raise a finger, raise a hand, start talking. Okay, so I'm going to start with Courtney, and then we'll go to Lisa, and then Armin.
Okay, so for me, I've always been an advocate that yes, religious indoctrination is child abuse. And just to kind of comment on Sean's point about the difference between teaching your kids about Santa and then teaching them about God. With Santa Claus, it's really one time a year they get presents. While I don't necessarily agree with teaching kids about Santa, I did raise my son that way because it was more of like the magic of Christmas and seeing his face and whatever. When you teach children about God, and it's not only just about telling them they're going to go to hell if they do something bad. Yes, that's definitely something that works on their mind. But it's also teaching them that God loves them, that if they pray, their prayers are going to be answered. For a child like me who grew up with abuse and, you know, just a really crappy childhood, it makes you feel like you're not worth God's love. So it's not necessarily you don't believe in God, you just feel worthless because why isn't God helping me? Why isn't God stopping the bad things from happening? You know, am I not good enough for God to love? So that's kind of the angle that I take with religious indoctrination being child abuse, because it works on the psyche that way, not just with punishment, but with even with the love aspect of it.
Thanks, Courtney. I think that's a really interesting nuance to bring into the conversation, as well as not just the afterlife component, but also how religion makes children think about themselves in terms of their own identity. And again, I think a lot of us come from a Christian background, but if people have any insight or feedback from other religions in terms of their understanding of how those religions teach children and how kids understand their faith, that would be helpful as well. If you're out there and listening and you have some feedback on that, please, again, tweet us with hashtag Atheist Republic. Let's see, who did I say was going to go next? Oh, yes, Lisa. So Lisa and Armin, and then Erasmo also had some comments.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Like Courtney, I did have a very abusive childhood, raised by a single mom, all sorts of craziness happening. I'll spare you the details. But I was not raised with religion for the most part, but my mother did have a friend who sometimes helped her, like she bought me shoes one time when my mom couldn't afford them, stuff like that, and then forced us, like quote unquote forced, because my mom didn't know how to say no, forced us to go to Baptist church with her. And that's when I really realized that this whole God thing sounded like a cartoon character. It didn't sound real, but I was still very afraid. Like I was afraid, oh no, if I don't believe in God, what if it is real? And then I'll go to hell. And also like Courtney, I had the thoughts, well, if this God person's real, why am I getting abused like this? You know, that's crazy. Personally, I think, I don't know, abuse is kind of a strong word, but I think it's definitely lazy parenting. I mean, instead of actually talking to your children about life and about making good choices, you tell them there's a man in the sky who's watching them when you can't see them. I mean, it is very much Santa Claus, but sort of like a darker Santa Claus, you know?
I think that your comment about abuse and maybe defining abuse is something that would be interesting to bring into this. If it is abuse, what type of abuse are we talking about? How are we sort of defining that? Obviously, different countries, different individuals define child abuse differently. We have very nuanced views now of parenting and childhood and human development because we know so much, and that obviously complicates things, as kids used to basically be movable property similar to livestock. That was how they were seen. We see children different now because we know different. So our views of abuse are obviously very different, and what's allowed and not allowed is different by culture and by society. So I think that's a very interesting component to bring into the conversation. Erasmo, or maybe I asked Armin to go. I don't know. Armin, do you want to yield to Erasmo, or do you want to go next? Erasmo, go ahead. Sorry, Erasmo, if I wasn't clear, you can go ahead and go.
Okay. I always have problems with the microphone, but hey, this is my point of view. I wouldn't say that it's exactly how do you say abuse, because according to the definition of well, according to what most quotes say about abuse in religion is that um, is that most parents or most people threaten their children with the religion, saying, if you do not do this, you will go to hell. If you do not do this, you won't be loved by God. That is how do you say it? A coward's way out of not dealing with what is going on, or what should be dealt with. Well, I think that it's not exactly abuse. It's just a way of the use of indirect speech. They're not exactly threatening children, but they're certainly using a scapegoat way of trying to educate children. And I agree with Lisa. It is a way of lazy parenthood. And I recall back when I was a child, 15, 17 years ago, I honestly couldn't even care less about religion. I just went to religion classes and just had to do what I had to do. Yes, mental and emotional abuses have some way of participation in the religion education. I'm pretty sure I had more things to say, but when I'm in a spotlight like this, I tend to forget. I think that's everything I had to say.
Thanks, Erasmo. That's okay. We'll go back and forth a lot, so no worries if you forget. I know it's a little bit, especially when we have a lot of people, it can be a little bit difficult when we have to mute mics, and it's hard to kind of respond directly to people's comments. So it's a little bit more like a panel instead of a conversation. So let's go ahead. Armin, go ahead, and then I'm going to move to Todd and then to Ali. So Armin, go.
You know, I hear a lot of people having an issue with this, calling it child abuse. A lot of people say, I'm an atheist. I had religious parents that are still religious. They told me about God and heaven, and I ended up fine. I didn't consider it abusive. They love me. I loved them back. I'm an atheist now. They know it. They still love me. It didn't have that big of an effect on me. They think like calling it abuse might be a bit of an exaggeration, and some people might even argue that even calling it lazy parenting might be exaggeration. It's, you know, for a lot of, I'm playing the devil's advocate here. I don't know if this is right or not, but this is what I hear. A lot of religious parents, you know, religion is not that big of that major part of their parenting. You teach them and then you forget about it. The rest of the parenting is the same as other parents. But even for and even among the religious parents that do focus a lot on hell and making sure that you follow religion correctly, some people argue even with regards to that, that's also coming from a place of love, because if you actually believe in hell, you really good parenting would be to try to avoid your children burning in hell. So, whereas abuse seems to a lot of people like intentional harm, and even, I mean, I as a kid also, my parents didn't scare me, you know, to fear hell, but my school did a lot, and I think, I mean, I turned out okay. I didn't, I mean, it was bad. I really, I got really traumatized, but most of the other kids I know that went through the same, that hear the same things about afterlives, they weren't as traumatized as me. So it seemed to me that most kids, they just don't take it that seriously. And my last point is that, and this is all just counter arguments. I'm not saying if it's, I don't know if it's true or not. My last point is that some people say that calling this abuse is, when you have real child abuse, calling things that are not child abuse is taking attention. It's basically, downplaying what real child abuse is and what we really need to, if people consider mild, bad parenting child abuse, all of a sudden we're downplaying real child abuse that needs more attention. So these are the common counter arguments that I hear. A lot of people say like we're trying to get attention by calling things, over dramatizing, things that are problematic, but maybe we shouldn't try to overplay how significant of an issue it is. So that's my devil's advocate.
I think those are a lot of really good points. I'm going to try to either hold them in my head or write some down so that we can bring them up as we go along and talk about them. Initially, right now, I'm going to go ahead and move to Ali and then Todd. And then I just want to get everybody's kind of initial impression, and then we'll go to some of these counterpoints and specific issues that come into play when we're talking about this issue. So Ali and then Todd.
Okay, so I've actually written a blog about religion being child abuse. And really what it came down to was the aspects of religion that are taught that are more child abuse than the actual religion itself, because every atheist parent, in my opinion, should be teaching their child about religion, should be teaching their child about Christianity, about Islam, about Judaism, about everything that you can teach your child. Of course, teach your child. So the actual teaching of your child religion is not child abuse by any means. It's the other aspects that come with it. And certainly going to hell is something that a lot of atheists like to say, oh, that's abuse, that's abuse. That's only a tiny little portion. We need to look at all the other aspects that get taught along with it. You need to be a virgin. If you lose your virginity, you're this horrible person. It's sick. It actually is, in my opinion, bordering sexual abuse to take someone and tell them you're disgusting, you're nasty, you shouldn't explore your body, you shouldn't learn different things about sex until after you're married. It puts a lot of fear in people. It puts a lot of anxiety in people. A lot of people have come forward and said, look, I got married. I did the whole virgin thing. Everyone in my community knew I was a virgin. Everyone in my community then knew that once I lost my virginity, I wasn't a virgin anymore. And that whole identity that I had set on myself is now corrupt. It's gone. So who am I? And now sex is just this weird thing because it was thrown upon you. Your virginity was some gift that was given to you by God, and now you don't have it anymore. So the actual teaching of religion, no, absolutely not abuse. The aspects that come with religion absolutely are disgustingly abusive, in my opinion.
That was one of the things I was gonna mention. So I'm glad Ali picked up that point, and that is there's a difference between the teachings and the practice, and part of the practice of it is the social elements that grow up in certain groups, congregations, or whatever, what have you. The norms of that and how these principles are practiced and the different things that go on there. I think to Valerie Tirico's article, I think she made a good point that the part of what lays the groundwork for any of it being abusive in the first place is the fact that it's dehumanizing, that it constructs a system and elevates the system above everything else and says you must conform to this. Here are some general principles. Here are some general things that you can glean from vague statements in a book. But we need specifics. How do we operate? How do we work that out? So there's a difference between orthodoxy and orthopraxy, right teaching versus right practice. And that's where you get a lot of these abusive practices in. That's where you get the issues of disfellowship, that if you congregate, or if you're very close with anybody that's outside of that particular group, or if you engage in behaviors that the in-group deems as dangerous to the system, then you are completely removed from that community altogether. And the ones that disfellowship tend to use it as a carrot and stick, because they encourage building social bonds and making the in-group your tight group. So the threat of disfellowship makes it that much more scary, and it's that much more traumatic when it does happen. Now, as to the larger topic, is it abusive? I think it's important to define our terms and what we mean by abusive. I think it certainly can be, because to me, whenever I hear abuse, whenever I hear that term abuse, to me that carries the notion of intent. There's a certain level of intent that goes with it, and by and large, I don't think that children necessarily are. I don't think that it's intentionally. Probably most cases, it's not intentionally passed on with the intent to be abusive, with the intent to control, with the intent to. Well, I'd step back. There's a control element in there. And that's sort of self-perpetuating, and that feeds into it's a good parenting element, because you can stick this fear in there and then they police themselves. So I can see where the lazy parenting thing comes in. I can see where that comes from. But for me, it's whenever it trickles down to kids, and whenever it trickles down to them being traumatized by different things, I think most of the time it's passed on by sincere, well-meaning people who are just sincerely wrong. And it's not the parents that are being abusive, it's the system itself and the teachings and the practice of these principles that are themselves dehumanizing and abusive, and they get passed on down. So I think it is, in the cases that it is child abuse, it's being carried. It is abusive because it's being carried out by abused adults.
Thanks, Todd. Casper has joined us and has some thoughts. Go ahead.
So I may be a little bit of an oddball here, because I grew up in a fundamentalist Christian home. So for me personally, it absolutely was child abuse. I have clinical depression and mild schizophrenia that I've had since a very early age in my life. And early on in my life, I was told that I was being accosted by demons, and that I had Satan influencing me in my life, and insane bullshit like that. So my actual problems were never addressed. I ended up turning to drugs and ended up in prison because I needed some sort of escape, some sort of outlet, and I didn't know how to deal with what I was dealing with. And to me, that's one of the biggest aspects of this is you take on when you use religion and you force it onto your kid, it gives them an unrealistic viewpoint of reality. They don't understand what reality is. I honestly believed that I had demons or Satan influencing me in my life, and that's not realistic. That's not reality. And so when I ended up in prison, I ended up, nutting up in prison, and then finding out I had actual mental disorders. It was one of those things of, well, no, I'm being influenced by this thing, and no, I wasn't. And I never got the chance to have that addressed at an age where I could have avoided all of that other crap that I went through because of it. So there's this big problem with not teaching your children reality. That's what I focus on with my kids. You can learn about religion, you can learn about fiction, fantasy, you can read every horror novel out there, you can watch all these movies, you can play all these video games, but in the end, that's fiction, that's fantasy, this is reality. And that's what I try to focus on. And I think when you force a religious aspect onto your children, you're taking that option out of the equation. Because regardless of whether you're a fundamentalist or whether you're a moderate or anything, every single Christian on this planet believes that demons and Satans are a real element in their lives somehow, whether it's an influential element outside of themselves, whether it's a real entity that can affect them physically. They all believe that, and that isn't realistic. So it gives this alternative scapegoat. It gives this this justification for all these things. You can go out and kill your family, and you can say, "Oh, well, Satan made me do it. You know, Satan fucking infected my dog, and my dog was talking to me and made me do this." And we see those people every day, and they were never giving a realistic viewpoint on life. You know, they came into it thinking, "Oh, this shit is real," and it's not. So I think there's an element that when you warp someone's mind like that, that is abusive. Whether you mean to or not, whether the intent is there or not, it's abusive, because people need a solid base to build on. I didn't become a decent human being until I was 25 years old, and that's just silly. That's horrible. You know, I was a terrible person up to that point, and most of it was because I didn't have any realistic viewpoint on the world around me. You know, there was all these conflicting ideas within my own psyche that were thrust on me early on, and you don't just walk away from that. You know, you don't just go, "Oh, okay, that's bullshit. Well, never mind. I'm done with it." You can't. Not when it's thrust on you for years and years and years and years. It's systematically abusive, whether you mean it to be or not. And I think that's the problem. It's, you know, there was a point in time where we didn't even question the idea of your kid getting paddled or beaten at school by their teacher if they acted out. And now I have to sign a piece of paper every year from the school saying whether or not I'm allowing the school to paddle my child if he's acting up in school. And no, of course not. No one's putting their hands on my kid. So the idea that maybe we're overplaying the whole thing, to me, it's not a matter of that. It's a matter of changing the mindset, because we had to work to get to the point where we understood that letting a stranger in a situation that you're not aware of beat your kid, that's abusive, and you should have a say-so in that. And in the same respect, we have to change the mindset here. Yes, it's abusive to force these ideas onto your kid. That's abusive. And I know it seems like something that gets overplayed, but the fact is, if we don't change the mindset by bringing attention to it, then it's going to keep getting ignored. There's going to be kids out there that go through shit like what I went through, and that's not fair to them. That's not fair at all. So, you know, that's where I'm at with it anyway.
Thank you, Casper. I think there's a lot of things coming into play here that I like to just throw out there, so that as people are talking, you can maybe think of them. One is that we're obviously talking, anytime we bring words, anytime we use words when we're talking, things can get really complicated. So we're using some, for example, this came up in the conversation in Facebook. If we're saying that religion, teaching religion, or doing something out of a religious motivation, certain components of religion are abusive, are we talking about going into people's homes and staging interventions? Are we talking about, what does this mean? If we're saying abuse, are we saying we're going to take kids away? Are we saying, you know, what? Obviously, we're not going to take millions of children away from their families to protect them from religion and put them where? So I think, but what, you know, Casper sort of mentioned, that it just because we're saying certain things are abusive doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to go out and start taking kids away, but it does start the conversation of, if we believe these things are abusive, just like some people started believing that hitting kids repeatedly over the course of their life is abusive, that conversation gets started, and then we start talking about what that means practically. But that practical application of what does this mean, what components of religion are we saying are abusive, is something interesting I'd like to kind of throw into the mix. Another thing that somebody mentioned in the Facebook group is that it's not abuse, but it's exploitation, which I thought was an interesting choice of words. And this was Ruby, and she says, exploitation of the innocence of children, their dependence on and affection for their parents in order to indoctrinate them with religious beliefs that they may later find deeply troubling and inconsistent with their own emerging worldview. Such exploitation can become abusive when it's so extensive, persistent, and controlling that it completely undermines a child's sense of self, which I thought was a really interesting perspective and good way of putting it. I like the nuance of that. I personally would not call religion abusive as a blanket statement, but there are definitely components that are abusive. So there's some things that I'd like to kind of toss in and people can think about as they're talking. And I do want to say that I think it's insane that schools even have the option of hitting children. That was crazy. I knew that was the case in some schools. I didn't realize it was actually kind of a state thing. So yay, Texas. Way to be. We're going to move on to Erasmo, and then what did we say? Erasmo, Courtney, and Ali are our next batch. So we'll see. Erasmo, go ahead.
I always have problems with my microphone, but well, here I go. Yes, I mostly agree with what people have been saying about abuse. What do we mean by abuse? I don't think by the way we see it, that how people treat their children with religious education, I'm sorry, that will be considered as a way of abuse. I don't think it will fulfill the requirements of an exact definition by abuse. And yes, I think it's more just like what I watched in the video a few minutes ago before starting this Hangouts conversation. Is that what do we mean by horror? Just for an example, it's just a subjective way of how people feel horrified, feel horrorized by their childhood trauma. So in a way, abuse can be a subjective definition for most people. And what I mean here is about the commonality, about what's common, what is being dealt in some countries, some cultures. For example, in Mexico, 50 years ago, it was perfectly okay to hit or slap your children at classroom if they didn't behave. It still happens nowadays in the southern part of the country, but people have been changing. In some other parts of the world, it is considered common. Why? I don't know. Perhaps God's love is so big enough that they like to slap children around. I don't know. I think that it just have to be what people deal nowadays, and that is very sad. What we consider to be normal, what we consider to be harmful, abusive, other people don't think like that. For example, some time back, I watched a video posted in the Atheist Republic page on Facebook about some sort of initiation, how an Arab parent branded as his son with a metal plate, just like cows used to be branded in some ranches. That is considered to be common, but most of us, we consider it to be abusive. So, to sum it, I think in some places it is to treat children or treat people in some way, it is perfectly common and perfectly humanist. But most of us don't think like that. It all depends on the people. And also, what I want to add about the people who have been raised in religious education, they seem like an army. They are all uniformed. They all have this. I'm not sure if you see it the way I do. They all seem the same. Most of them have the same appearance. Most of them have the same haircut. Most of them have the same uniform, the same suit, the same tie, the same pair of pants. I'm not sure if you see it the way I do, but I think that's just an army that has been growing up. And what's terrifying of that is that that army is willing to attack people who just think differently. And to prove my point, there have been some terrorist attacks by ISIS, and they look uniformized. What's sad is that they are treated like an army, but they're just following a religion. That's what I wanted to add.
I think the different. Thanks, Erasmo. I'm gonna let Erasmo mute his mic before I talk. Thanks. I think it's an interesting point to bring up the differences of culture. What we're talking about as abuse and how we define that compared to or in relation to what religion does is going to be different than somebody in another country, because their baseline for how children are treated and what classifies as abuse is going to be different. And so I think that's why this can sort of, once you really start digging in, it gets so nuanced, and I think that's good, because I think these types of conversations are important. I did want, Corey, did you have, I don't know if you can see our side chat bar, so I wanted to ask you if you had anything you wanted to say. You can just raise a finger or wave your hand or something. People usually chime in our little chat bar to say they want to talk, but I'm not sure you can actually see that. So I'm going to give you a chance to unmute your mic if you have something to say.
Okay, so it is unmuted now. Can you hear me?
Okay, there you go. Now you're back. Go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, I don't know. Everyone pretty much said the stuff that I want to say. I kind of want to reiterate the distinction between teaching religion and then indoctrinating, a kid into religion. There's a huge difference there. And then also, after what Jason said too, it's important to distinguish between raising a kid in a fundamentalist religious upbringing, and then maybe raising them in more of something like I experienced, which is just sort of a loose denominational, we go to Sunday school every once in a while, that sort of thing. And basically what I'm saying is, in my case, I don't think you could qualify it as child abuse. It was really just harmless, and then eventually, when I thought through it, it obviously in retrospect it seems silly now, but I mean, that's really all I wanted to say, and I'm kind of ready for the questions and to chime in there. So
thanks, Corey. Okay, so then I think next we have Courtney and then Allie. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we kind of touched upon how do you define abuse, because usually whenever we think of child abuse, we think of children either being severely neglected or, physically hurt. But the problem is, while, physical abuse is absolutely horrific to do to any child, emotional and psychological abuse last a lot longer, and they can actually do more damage sometimes than certain physical abuses. Obviously, I'm not talking about the fringe where, children are really being severely abused, but like spanking and stuff like that. Psychological and emotional abuse are a lot worse. And I know that several points have been brought up about, maybe it's not abuse, maybe we shouldn't, it's not intentional. It might not be intentional, but we need to, again, talk about it, because, we need to let parents see that, yes, it might not be intentional to you, but just because it's not intentional, just because you don't realize that it's abuse, doesn't mean that it's not abuse. And like Corey said, he grew up in a pretty progressive church. I did as well. But like I said, for someone like me, it was a lot worse, because we were surrounded by love, and that's all that they preached. They didn't really preach too much about hell. I mean, obviously, like Allie brought up, if you lose your virginity, oh my goodness, you're a horrible person and you're going to go to hell and whatnot. So, I mean, that's definitely a great point to bring up, because sex is a natural part of human life, and if you don't teach a child the right the right things about sex, you are going to have a lot of problems and a lot of self-identity issues, and it's going to bring up different things. And again, it is emotional and psychological abuse. And I was looking up some of the definitions, and the definitions for the federal American system for child abuse is any recent act or failure to act on part of the parent or caretaker which results in death, serious physical or emotional harm, sexual abuse, or exploitation, or an act or failure to act presents an imminent risk of serious harm. So having that definition, it really, you really can't classify, religious indoctrination as child abuse, because it's not an imminent risk of, of death or, physical harm, unless they're doing like train up a child, which is just absolutely horrific. But just like the progressive views, Sunday school, whenever, teach about God, pray every other day or whatever. But it still leaves a lasting effect on a child. And I always tell people, there's a reason when atheists come out of religion, they say it's such a freeing experience, because you let go of this psychological and emotional hold that your religious indoctrination had on you for so many years. And Casper brought up that he wasn't a good person, or a decent person until he was 25. Well, all these years, once you hit 25, you're looking back at your life and saying, what did I do with it? So then you start questioning everything, and then it just becomes, sometimes a vicious cycle, and it can really work on your psyche even more once you're an adult. And that was just my 2 cents.
I think the thing I keep thinking about is so much of this can happen without religion. So when we're asking the question, is religion, raising a child in a religious experience, is that child abuse, or is that abuse? Somebody mentioned in the group too, it's not just child abuse, it can be abuse in general. So many of these things that people mention, I can personally think of people I know who are not religious who essentially did the same things. Emotionally manipulated their children with fear. They exposed their kids to developmentally inappropriate imagery. All of these things that I think are wrong and bad to do to kids, or to involve kids in a religious context, I think are also bad, just as bad outside of a religious context. Now, that said, I do understand why some people would disagree with that, and I probably, to varying degrees, might disagree with that statement even myself, because there is a really powerful impact of demoralizing or dehumanizing a person to the point where they become reliant upon the religion, and then adding the fear and the developmentally inappropriate components to those things. And I think that's why there's such a visceral response from people when we talk about abuse in religion. So then, to me, that would speak more to sort of related to violence on behalf of religion, just in general, in the sense that religion may, and this is maybe the question or the conversation, foster an environment where those abusive behaviors are more normative, or are seen more often, or are easier to excuse, or easier to perpetuate. So it might not necessarily be that religion is abusive, or even that teaching a child about hell is abusive. I'm not even sure that I would say necessarily that that's abusive. But if we're saying religion, theology, dogma creates an environment whereby these abusive behaviors are more easily acted upon another person, and also excused, then I think that's something I could definitely be on board with. And that's, for me personally, speaking on behalf of myself, that's the kind of language I would like to see come from atheists, because that, to me, fosters a much more productive conversation than religion is abusive. Because I think that's a very strong statement. And when we talk about abuse, we have 2 choices. We can make it really narrow to make sure we're honoring the meaning of abuse and making sure that people get help and and the intervention happens. Or we can make the definition very broad and then limit the consequences, where we say, yes, it's abusive, but that doesn't mean every abusive person should be arrested. It simply means we're saying this is abusive and it needs to be addressed. And this is similar to the conversation about racism. With something that's racist, we're either going to say racists are these very narrow group of people, or, hey, we probably all can say racist things at one point or another. That doesn't mean we're evil people. That means the conversation needs to continue to happen. You know what I mean? So there's a couple things there that I think we can talk about. Do we expand the definition of abuse? Do we create a more nuanced conversation? Do we keep it narrow to protect abuse as a term, and things like this? So those are things that have been going through my head as people have been talking, and that'll probably be the last I'll say of it, because I don't want to monopolize the conversation. But I do want to go on to Courtney. Corey, I want to give you a chance as well. Please just wave your hand or raise a finger or something. If you have something to say, I'll see you and then add you to the queue. Allie, go ahead.
So on that note, what you were talking about, Makisha, the reason why I think a lot of people do find it still abusive is the fact that you have to take children's frame of mind into consideration with all of this. It's been said many times before. I think I even used this in one of my blogs, but mother is God in the eyes of a child. When you hand a child a pill and say, here, sweetheart, take this pill, this is going to make you feel better, a child doesn't question, a child doesn't hesitate for a second. That's my mom. My mom is doing what is best for me. She's giving me what's best for me, and they take it with no questioning whatsoever. So when the same mom holds a hand up to her child and says, I'm going to whack you if you don't do this, you're going to hell if you don't do that, they're going to take that with absolute 100% pure trust that that is absolutely what's going to happen. And so to me, taking a child that has that much trust in you and forcing these ideas upon them, I kind of do still find that abusive. And you do have a great point. Do we change the definition of abuse? It's not imminent physical danger, but sometimes it is. Sometimes these children can be driven so psychologically to the point where they kill themselves. So is that when we consider it abuse, when it gets finally to that point? I think definitely we should keep this as an open conversation and something to discuss. Casper and I came from very strong Christian backgrounds, fundamentalists, if you will, where, yeah, I was raised to believe in demons. And, you know, if somebody's life is going well, my dad would tell me, oh, it's because they're a person of God. And then I got a little bit older and said, well, Dad, what about, you know, Marilyn Manson? Why is he doing so well if he is not a man of God? Oh, it's because the devil wants to play tricks. I mean, there's always some sort of answer. That's just not the truth. People who are successful earned that success in one way or another. Maybe they got lucky. Maybe they worked hard. I don't know. But God had nothing to do with it. The devil had nothing to do with it. And taking children and making them believe these silly, outrageous claims, if I do really good for God, God's going to give me everything I need. No, you need to fight for it yourself. It's just really raising generations of bad people, not bad people, just people that can't function correctly in a normal society. It's not God that's giving you your success. You went to college, you filled out your application to get a job. Nobody did that for you but you. And it just kind of creates this weird, hostile environment for everybody in the community when you think that, you know, when I do something good for somebody, after a traumatic event, people say, oh, thank God for this. No, don't thank God for this. I took my time to do this. Not that I'm looking for a thank you, but let's be realistic here. So it's abusive in the sense that it takes children, it warps their mentality. It absolutely can drive them to the point of physical imminent danger. And I think that those things kind of should be addressed as well. Should every parent who teaches their children about religion be arrested? Absolutely not. Should every parent who indoctrinates their children be arrested? Absolutely not. Because even as atheists, we also indoctrinate our children in one way or another. even though I don't like to tell my children what to think, somehow my actions, there's something they're learning from me, and it's indoctrination. So certainly I'm not saying that, but I am saying that the aspects that come with religion, spare the rod, spoil the child, you know, those kind of mentalities, that is where the abuse gets hidden in religion, and that's where we really need to talk about it. I just don't agree with that passage at all. I don't agree with parents being able to hide behind passages in the Bible to not take their children to a doctor when they're sick. Your child is sick. We've got modern medicine. You're not praying that away. And we have, I think, 12 states that allow that still. Parents can kill their children. They kill their children by not taking them to the doctor. And this is excused behavior. Here you get probation for 10 years. No, I'm sorry, you killed someone. And I think that this stuff absolutely needs to be addressed. And that's why it's important for us to keep that conversation open. Do we need to be harsher about it? I think we do. I think we do. And I don't think that I would change my tone to open up, you know, more conversation for more people, because they're going to believe what they want to believe anyways. But maybe the louder we talk about it, the more we talk about it, something somewhere in there is going to make sense to someone. Something is going to hit a chord, and that's what we need. We just need people to hear the message, hear how volatile it really can be, and push on that.
Thanks, Allie. I think where I definitely come down on this issue a little bit harder is when this is, in so many cases it seems like the state, the government, whatever, wherever makes your rules and laws, makes too many excuses for religion in many cases. And I think that's where I do get frustrated about this issue, is that certain behaviors that outside of religion are seen as wrong, inappropriate, illegal, abuse, violence, whatever, are excused on the grounds of religion by what is supposed to be a secular government. That's where I don't have any patience for that. So if we're just going to say, okay, well, what are we going to define as abuse? Is it abuse to withhold medical care from your child? Knowingly withhold medical care from your child after receiving information, after having, being an informed individual you are choosing, is that wrong? Should that be illegal? Yes, it should. But if you can justify to me that you have a religious reason why, then no, it's okay. Now that doesn't make any sense to me at all, and that's where I start. If we as a society, whatever we end up landing on, whatever we agree on is abusive behavior to do to a child, we can't just say, but it's okay if you can tell me that your God says it's okay. And that's where I start getting really angry about this issue as it relates to abuse. Now, when I'm talking to people, when I'm having conversations with people, I wouldn't use the terms abuse, because I would like to see parents think critically about the decisions they're making when it comes to parenting their kids. And as soon as I start popping out words like abuse, you better believe they're not going to listen to a word I'm saying. So when I'm having conversations with people, with individuals, with groups, or whatever, and I personally don't define those things as abuse. But if we as a society do determine something is abusive, then it needs to apply. We can't. These religious exemptions are just constantly coming up, and it's really maddening to me. So that's an issue that I think, Allie, you brought up, with especially the medical stuff that I think really hits a nerve for me. I think, let's see, raise your hand if you were next or if you have something to say, because I've lost track of who's next. Okay, Corey, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm kind of like writing down notes as I go because I have a horrible memory apparently. But leaving aside sparing the child, or sparing the rod and actual physical abuse and all this, I just, in the original context of just teaching religious values or beliefs to your children, it's interesting because I think what we're basically talking about is whether or not it's abuse to teach false beliefs to your children. And it kind of depends on how you want to look at that, what perspective you want to take. So from like a utilitarian consequentialist perspective, using moral philosophy terms, it would of course depend on the false beliefs that you're actually teaching the children. Good example would be like the vaccination whole thing. Like you could argue that teaching children that vaccinations are bad, and that would be bad. That would be abuse. Pretty easy. I think most people would agree. Reasonable people, that is. But it's harder to make that argument, say, about, I don't know, using extreme examples because it's really easy to carry the point, but say a child who just lost a good friend, or like a father, like in a car accident or something like that. To tell that child that the kid is in heaven, or their father is in heaven or something like that, that's a false belief by our view. But it's hard for me to say that would be abuse. Like you have to sort of balance lying to the kid or telling the kid that, sort of, I don't know, soften the trauma that the kid's going through at the time. So I just thought that sort of opens up the whole discussion to a little bit more. And then of course, so another, I guess a good example, just to also make the point of abuse in this context, would be if you are telling children that their friend is going to burn in hell for not being a Christian or something like that. So that, on that view, would be wrong. That would be abuse. And then the only other thing really I was thinking is something that from what Makisha had said. What was it? Oh, about basically, I want to say too, disclaimer, I completely agree in the sense that we shouldn't allow parents to withhold treatment from their children on a religious basis. I agree. Certainly, from my opinion, that's our view. I completely agree. But of course, they're going to say that that's just us, pushing our secular values and beliefs on them, and leaving aside the whole idea of, we'd have to get into the whole discussion again about whether atheism is religion, and I don't think any of us want to go there, but I mean, it would at least bring up that point in the discussion, and we would have to deal with that, I think. But yeah, so I think that's all for now.
Great stuff. Thanks, Corey. Armin, go ahead.
I just want to add an example to what Makisha said. We just need to treat them equally. And here's an example that if a non-religious parent tell their kids that if you do something wrong, I'm going to burn you with cigarettes. We consider that, I don't know what we call it, but probably we don't. I mean, it's abusive, right? So why? It seems like, why is that not the same as another parent saying that if you don't behave, you're going to burn in hell? So if the parent that is telling the kid that I'm going to burn you with cigarettes, if we see that as abusive, then we shouldn't dismiss the parent that is telling the kid that you're going to burn in hell forever if you misbehave. That should be treated the same. But it seems like one is accepted by society as something religious people do, but one of them is looked down upon much more than the other. So whatever we call it, whether we call it abusive or not, maybe we should be treating these things equally. I don't know if we should. Are they the same? Are they not the same? That's something to consider.
And a good topic of conversation, probably for another time, because I think that could probably go in a lot of different directions. So we are coming upon our last couple minutes. I want to give last thoughts for our live chat, and then obviously in our group we can continue to talk amongst ourselves. You can continue to tweet us, #AtheistRepublic, send us an email, send us a comment. Any of our conversations can continue in blog form or in our newsletter. We often get inspiration from the comments and the emails that you send us, so please be in contact and let us know what you think. We'd like to take these conversations even broader outside of this group. So last comments, and then we'll wrap it up. So go ahead and raise a finger or shout at me in the sidebar. All right, Casper, go ahead.
All right, so I just real quick, I wanted to address one thing that Corey said, and in mentioning how we the idea of pushing secular beliefs on other people, I think we do push secular beliefs on everyone all the time. The difference between that and pushing religious beliefs is I can back up those secular beliefs with logic and facts, every last one of them. I can show you specifically why what I'm telling you you should be doing is correct, is ethical, and moral. And they can't. They have a book, and it's full of shit. So they have nothing. So there is a big difference there. And I don't feel ashamed in the least bit of saying, yeah, I'm pushing my secular beliefs on you, and I can back it up. Now, if you can back up your religious beliefs and show me where your bullshit has any substantiation, then we'll talk. Until then, you need to do what I'm telling you to do, because my interests are in the best interest of all humanity, and yours are personally defined by insanity. So there's a big difference there. Now, I have one other point too. I've been doing a lot of research work for a book that I'm doing in the Holy Shit series on Hinduism. And when we talk about abuse, we're talking about general child abuse here, but one of the things that we hardly ever look at is how what we teach others affects others. So when we teach our children something, it can affect everyone else around them. And when you look at India and you look at the Hindu faith right now, the caste system in India, the horrible and atrocious just poverty levels there, that is because of indoctrination. That is because of religious indoctrination from the ground up. Teaching your children that this caste system is viable and that you're supposed to follow it, and so there are these outcasts that are untouchables and they need to just be left in the dirt to die, and that's their karma coming back on them. That's what religion does. And it's not just about what you do to your kids, it's about how that translates out to the rest of the world. It's bigger than just us. It's bigger than just one person. It's bigger than just how you interact with your child. That's not your property. Your child is not your property. That is another human being that one day will have an interaction with the rest of the world. And what they do in those interactions affects everyone. So it's bigger than us. And that's why that's why the conversation's necessary. Because we're not individuals. As much as we want to be individuals, we're a bigger organism. Humanity itself is one big organism. So everything you do affects everyone else. And we have to start realizing that if we want to do better. Otherwise, we're just going to kill ourselves. It's like cancer, you know? When the organism fights against itself, it kills itself. So.
Thanks, Casper. Great points. And I think religion and human rights is a topic we can add to our list of things that we can talk about. Our tweetable for the day should probably be that it's bigger than ourselves, but I think it's going to be Casper's They Have a Book and It's Full of Shit. So thanks for that, Casper. And we're at the end of our time. I know everybody has a lot of great thoughts. If any of you here would like to expound on this in our blogs, you can just shoot me an email, send me a blog. We'll put it up and put it out there. So thanks for joining us here today. We'll have links and references down below. And please go visit atheistrepublic.com. If Atheist Republic means anything to you, if you find it of value, please take a look at our volunteer opportunities as well as financial contribution opportunities. Check us out on Twitter, Atheist Republic, and shoot us an email if you have any thoughts or questions. If you have any more feedback about this particular issue, we would love to hear it, and you can share your comments and have conversation over on any one of our Facebook groups or forums as well. So check us out, get involved. Thanks for joining us. See you next week.